It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to this episode of Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and today we are going AMA style. We're just going to do some frequently asked questions that both of us get anytime we throw up a question box on Instagram, essentially, just our most commonly asked questions that we get. And this is probably going to be like a series. I feel like we have a lot that we thought would be fun to cover. So hopefully these next few episodes are just going to be like fun, short, sweet, to the point, just answering questions. So if you guys have additional questions that you want to add to these upcoming episodes, feel free to message us them on Instagram and we can add them to the list as well if we don't cover them today, or if they're already on the list, obviously we'll cover them. But first question I'm going to fire off at you, Jess. So I'll just ask you and then we'll just do our normal shenanigans of talking over each other. But first question is, how do I know when I am ready to cut calories in a deficit or when it's time to increase them?
Okay. Two parts. So if you are in a caloric deficit, or if you're about to enter a caloric deficit, first you want to see what your baseline is, right? So do the same things, eat normally like you would normally eat for a couple weeks to get a baseline. If you are maintaining weight, then that's your current maintenance. That's what your body's adapted to. If you are hitting an appropriate protein and fiber goal, then it would be your body will respond well and you will lose weight in primarily body fat if you cut calories from there, still prioritizing protein. Now, you don't have to cut crazy low calories. So just cut out a few hundred calories a day and see what happens. If you lose between 0.5 and like a pound and a half a week, you're doing the right thing. You don't need to cut lower. So how do you know when you're ready to cut calories further from that? When your body starts to plateau and your inputs are consistent. The reason I say your inputs are consistent is because your weight might fluctuate up 1 week. Give it at least 2 weeks before you drop calories lower. What happens if you had like a high sodium meal the night before or a drink or something like that? Like your weight could fluctuate from water weight retention. Give it a solid 2 weeks. Look at how your average weight is kind of fluctuating. If it really is stalled out and you're being super consistent and tracking all your inputs, then you can cut down a couple more hundred, because at some point your body will adapt to that amount, right? So you can keep going in that route until you get to a place where either it's not sustainable for you, or you're like, okay, cool, I've met my goal and I'm ready to now reverse my body back up in calories, maintaining all that weight that you lost.
I have like 3 caveats I want to add. I usually say, if you're on your own, to give it even probably closer to 3 weeks, because as a coach, we can very easily identify based on the data, are we really at a plateau or not? But for yourself, that can be a little harder. So you might need a little bit more time. Now, obviously, most people don't want to spend more time. So that's why hiring a coach is beneficial. The other thing that I was going to say is regarding the consistent inputs. One of the things that I see a lot is if someone they feel like they're just eating healthy and I'm eating healthy and not losing. I'm glad you're consistently eating nutrient-dense foods, but when it comes to physique change, you have to be in a calorie deficit and you have to monitor that calorie intake somehow. Or if you're not tracking, also have some way to monitor your intake and the volume of food that you're eating. So you have to have some data to reference before you say, I'm being consistent and nothing is happening. And like Jess said, like a true plateau. And if you're not being consistent, the third caveat was, people will say that and panic drop calories because they overate one night or whatever. So it's what you're doing most of the time. So if you have one off night where you overate, don't drop calories. Give your body a week to adjust. But you can't panic drop, because when you panic drop, that's how people end up living in a calorie deficit forever. So that's my intention to when to.
And also use your measurements and how your clothes fit as a reference point, not just the scale. So this goes for either a cut or when it's time to increase calories. Maybe your inches went down by a little bit, but your weight didn't go down. That's still fat loss progress. So don't panic. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. And to what Jill said, consistency is so important. That's usually that's the first reason why I wouldn't make changes is if somebody's consistent, their inputs are not consistent. So they're like, oh my gosh, I've been in this deficit for 3 weeks now and I haven't seen any weight loss. And it's like, well, you didn't track the last 3 days of last weekend. The week before you had one day that it was at 2,700 calories, but your target is 2,000 calories. Like if we're not consistent, then you're not actually doing the program, right? Like you need to actually hit these goals on average that you have set for yourself before assessing if they work or not. Because if they don't work because you're not doing them, then it's not that they don't work, right? So I think that's always important. When it comes to the increase question, so same question, but how do I know if I'm ready to increase calories if I'm in a muscle building phase or reverse? I'm a little more aggressive than than I think a lot of coaches are, because I want to rip the Band-Aid off and get clients through this mentally tough phase so that they can start to realize like, oh, I don't need to be scared of food anymore. But I am increasing clients by like 100 to 150 calories as long as their inches are not increasing. If their inches are the same or lower and we are adding calories, again, nutrient dense calories with plenty of protein, then I keep pushing them higher and higher and higher. And more calories is not inherently healthier. It is for the fact of building muscle and setting them up and kind of manipulating their metabolism so that when we go to cut, we don't have to cut as low. So as long as your inches are the same or lower, keep it climbing until you get to that place where you're like, okay, I'm so full, I really can't add more. Or really, that's it. If you're at a place or if you start gaining inches, then you've pushed it too far. Yeah. You shouldn't be gaining inches in an appropriate muscle building phase.
Mm-hmm. So and so when to initially increase from a deficit. If you've been dieting for weeks, months, whatever, you're at a plateau, the answer for when to increase is like yesterday. But start with 100 calories, right? Add 100 to whatever your deficit intake is. So if you're like, I swear I'm only eating 1,200 calories every day, great. Go to 1,300 or 1,400. Start there. Be super consistent. Guarantee you'll probably lose when you do that. You'll feel better, whatever, and then you'll be able to increase. So like Jeff said, we're kind of looking at all of that data in terms of your like physical, but also how you feel. If you're seeing improvements in your energy and your strength and your sleep quality, those are all really good indicators that you're moving in the right direction and your body's responding favorably. If you are increasing and you're noticing you feel really full, it might mean that your body just needs a little bit more time to adapt to whatever calorie intake you're giving it. So let's say you get up to 1,600 or 1,700 and you're like, oh my God, my hunger's like a 1. I'm so full all the time. Let your metabolism adjust. Sometimes I will keep a client in the same place for 3 or 4 weeks if it means they're really trying to adjust to that. And I promise the day will come when you're like, well, there it is. Like there's the hunger. Now, part of that also is as you're increasing calories, you're typically, at least if you're one of our clients for sure, increasing your activity, increasing your workout intensity just because you're eating more calories and have more energy to move around day to day because you're just naturally going to move more when you're taking in more calories.
And we have them lifting weights. So adding that stimulus is going to make you hungrier as you go too. So if at first, if at first you don't have hunger cues or you're like, no, I'm never hungry for breakfast, we totally believe you. And that makes sense because you've adapted your body to that place. Start eating breakfast every day and see what happens. Over time, your body will be like, okay, we're ready now because now you've adapted it back to expecting a meal at that time. Yeah.
And then increasing calories, like Jess said, it might be, sometimes it's 50 calories if I'm going through a specific thing with a client. Sometimes it's 300 because we're rushing for health reasons or whatever to get up to a higher calorie intake. Or maybe it's typically somewhere in the 1 to 200 range. It's not always every week. Sometimes, again, we have to spend some more time, but that's increasing. And I will say that you will probably see some fluctuation in your inches as you increase and get calories up because 2 reasons. One, hopefully you're training with the right intensity and adding muscle. Like a lot of times we'll see clients in a reverse diet who their waist measurement specifically will stay the same or come down a little bit, but their glutes will go up. That
because you're building muscle.
Right, because you're building muscle, and that's great. Like, cool. That's most women want. So those should be within reason, right? They're not going to be perfectly on the money. You're going to have fluctuations from your cycle. So that's another factor to consider. If you're sick, travel, whatever, you might see some fluctuations. That might mean you need to hold steady for a second. But don't be afraid. Most women do not get high enough in their calories because they're afraid of it. So don't be afraid to push that threshold a little bit. You can always scale it back. If you increase and you feel like things went up, hold there, it'll usually level off your inches, your weight, everything will come back down and stabilize. And then that's your signal to go up again. If it doesn't stabilize and you're like, oh, I'm hanging out these higher inches, I don't know what's going on, just come back down, drop it 100 to 200. You may have found your maintenance at that point if you're being consistent. Consistency in a reverse is so important, probably more important than in a deficit, honestly, because it can go sideways and you can gain unwanted body fat if you are half-assing it.
Also, so I want to clarify one thing you just said and then add another thing. When you're talking about intensity, I want to clarify, we're talking about how hard is every rep and every set during your lifts. It's not intensity like how high can I get my heart rate during my workout. Lifting weight is also a form of intensity. And then the second thing is when we are talking about increasing your targets from last week, go off of your actual inputs and your averages, not off of what your goals are. So like if I have a client and she's set at aiming for 1,600 calories, but last week I see her actual average for the week was 1,725 and she's losing inches, I'm bumping her up to 1,825. I'm not bumping it up from that 1,600 amount if her actual inputs are saying that her body can handle more. So go off of your actual inputs and your averages for the week, not off of what your goal
What
is.
you're set to. Yeah, absolutely. That's another good point in a deficit. I'll hear people say, my MyFitnessPal set to 1,200. I'm like, I don't give a shit what your MyFitnessPal says. What are you eating? Because that's what matters. Yeah. You're eating 1,800, but set to 1,200, or you're set to 1,500 and you're eating 1,100. Those are two very different conversations. So yes, averages of what you're eating. Also, daily weigh-ins most of the time are more beneficial because you can, one, neutralize your relationship with the scale and see the fluctuations and kind of detach from that. But also it's a lot more beneficial. Let's say you weigh in every Monday, but every Sunday you're really low on your water intake, or every Sunday you're a little bit more sedentary than normal. You're probably going to freak out every Monday, or maybe you drink on the weekend socially, right? You're going to have this like false spike in your weight with alcohol intake, for example. So, assuming even if you're tracking everything perfectly, these things can happen. So weighing daily can be beneficial because you can take the average for the week and monitor your trends in either direction, whether you're cutting, reversing, whatever. I don't love weighing daily in a reverse. It's a little much in terms of data, but in the early stages, especially if you're executing a reverse on your own, it can be super beneficial.
Yeah. And we know what to look for. Like we do this all day long. We know what to look for to be able to tell a client, nope, that's definitely just water retention. That's not body fat. Or, hey, you're pushing this a little too hard and you're not really paying attention to your caloric intake. And we probably are gaining a little bit of extra body fat. Let's reel it back in. So we know what to look for in each of those cases.
Last caveat I'm going to add to this question is as you increase, especially if you've been very low calorie and specifically very low carb, you are absolutely undoubtedly going to see an increase on the scale, because as you bring more carbs back into your body, you're going to pull in more water, more glycogen. Those things weigh something. It should be nominal. It could be 2 to 3 pounds sometimes that you see. I always tell clients actually coming out of a deficit, and this is me, I'm maintaining within 3 pounds of my bottom weight. I promise you, you are not going to maintain whatever that low was. You're like, oh, I lost 22 pounds. You lost around 20, and that's amazing, right? But you are not going to maintain that lowest body weight typically. Sometimes people will continue to lose a little bit. It's unlikely, or detach from that. Just don't assume that you will. If you do, great, because you're adding back in more food. There's literally more food inside of your body when you're weighing on a regular basis. Going forward, you're adding more muscle, right? So anyway, that's another thing.
And muscle is good tissue. I'll say this over and over again, but muscle is good, healthy, lean tissue. So in the course of 6 months, you might add 5 pounds of muscle, but your inches are going to stay relatively the same.
Yep.
Okay. Our next question.
Yeah.
I feel like you get this one all the time. How long do I have to reverse before cutting again? Or I'll switch the language up and say, how long should I stay at maintenance or build before cutting again?
Mm-hmm. So I feel like we answered this in a recent episode or talked about this, but reversing, I tell everyone, is not the solution. Reversing is the thing that is taking you from a lower calorie adaptation to a higher one. So it's just the method, right, of getting you to maintenance. The goal is to get to maintenance if you are not losing weight in a calorie deficit, or feel like you're restricting and working hard and not seeing results, right? Or you're just at a general plateau in your fat loss phase. So reverse dieting is just the strategy to take you from lower calories to higher calories, but the goal is to get to maintenance and live there. So reverse dieting timeline, I tell everyone, like 8 to 12 weeks, especially if you're a first one, is a fair like ballpark. But honestly, it depends on what your starting calories are, and it depends what your maintenance ends up being, because we don't really know for sure going into it. We can estimate. But if you're
And it depends how long you're willing to, how aggressive you're willing to
Yes.
let us push you. So I have
Yes.
some women, and we have to have the conversation of, okay, just so you know, if you are really anxious every time we increase calories and you want to hang here longer, that's okay. But by the time we get up there, I'm going to want you to live there for a couple months, just so you know. So it will drag out the process before you see any weight loss in terms of us going into a fat loss phase. And that's perfectly okay. But I have other clients who are like, yep, if my body's responding well, keep bumping me up. Let's get there faster. In those cases, maybe it takes us only 4 weeks to get to our highest point, but then we're living there for a couple months.
Yep. Yeah. So it does. It depends on your starting point. It depends what pace we're moving. I have a particular client right now. We're going really slow in her reverse. She had a prior awful experience with reverse dieting. So that's more of a psychological component that I'm navigating with her than a physical one, right? I can see the data. I can see that she's maintaining beautifully with her physique. But she's struggling mentally with eating more food. So instead, I'm doing very regular small increases with her. She knows I want to move faster. She knows it would be more beneficial from a health standpoint. And she knows I had a whole conversation with her. I am fine moving through this reverse at a slower pace for you, but you have to remember that we are dragging out the reverse diet process, which means when we don't just get to go tap maintenance and be done, then we have to live at maintenance. And I'm like, are we super clear on that? Right. So those are all the factors to consider. So you can gut tape, make a reverse tape longer if you want to go slower with it and get comfortable, and then maybe increase faster later. But what your starting point is, somebody that's starting at an average of 18 to 1900 calories versus somebody comes to me at 900 to 1000. That's an extra 1,000 calories we have to work to increase, right? That's a couple weeks or months extra. So that's the other factor to consider. But yeah, how long to be at maintenance? I tell everyone, every single person, I have this conversation on our consultation calls when they come in. I say, listen, in a perfect world, everyone that gets on this phone call and decides to move forward and sign up with one-on-one coaching with us would reverse diet and live at maintenance. And that would be the next 6 to 12 months of life, realistically, because I want to get you to a healthy place metabolically. I want to develop healthy habits for you that will last you forever. And I want to spend a lot of time building the muscle that you either lost in all of this endless dieting, or that you don't have or never built in the first place because you didn't train for that, right? But I tell everyone that would be the perfect scenario. However, typically we're looking at probably 8 to 12 weeks at maintenance, because we as coaches know that you are in a rush. You're typically hiring us because you're already at a place of panic. I don't like my body. I need help. I need results ASAP. So we usually try to get you to maintenance, build some muscle, live there, right? Make sure we're in a good place to go into a deficit. And then from there, we'll drop. Sometimes that works for clients. Sometimes we drop and we're like, nope, we're not seeing what we anticipated. I don't think we're adapted high enough metabolically. So then we end up going back to maintenance, and we'll tell clients, hey, we actually got to go back up longer. That can be very hard to determine on your own. So I think if you're doing it on your own, aim for 4 to 6 months at maintenance. And most people are going to be like, oh, I hate the sound of that. But realistically, I want you to go tally up how many years you've been dieting and tell me if 4 to 6 months at maintenance really sounds that bad. When, if you are training with the right intensity, progressive overload, being consistent with your inputs, you'll heal your relationship with food, with the scale, you'll sleep better, right? You're improving all your biofeedback. Metabolically, you'll be in a better place. Your next fat loss phase is going to be a freaking breeze.
And you're going to notice physique changes along the way just from training to build muscle. If you eat enough protein and add muscle and strength train appropriately. So train like you want to be a bodybuilder or a power lifter. I know that sounds crazy because most women are like, I don't want to get bulky, whatever. Yep. Train like you want to, because if you can put on a little bit of muscle, man, it's going to make keeping body fat off easier. And you're probably going to see your physique change along the way, even before you manipulate calories at all. So add protein and get really freaking strong during that 6 months. And I guarantee your next diet is going to feel like the first diet you ever went into where you're like, whoa, my body responds again. It's wild.
Yep, 100%. So, I talk about my current timeline because for the first time I went into a very structured protocol for my own physique, and I reversed and was at, my reverse time frame was very short. It was maybe
not for the first time, in a couple of years.
Yeah, sorry. For the first time in a couple of years last year, after about 4 to 5 years, was my first reverse in all of that time. And my reverse itself was maybe 4 to 8 weeks, but then I was at maintenance for 6 to 7 months. And then I went to my deficit from there. Now, most people, so for me, metabolically, I was a little bit downregulated because I just was being an idiot and under eating.
Because you're busy, because you're working all the time and then forgetting.
Yeah.
Like a lot of women.
I knew, and also I went through a hormone protocol where I had to take time off lifting, and I knew I needed to eat to build back the muscle that I lost. And that's kind of the space that I'm in now. So yeah, I think the more time at maintenance for the better. And honestly, most clients too, even if we do that shorter maintenance period initially, when we take them through a fat loss phase, they'll get results. We usually tell people, hey, this is probably going to be a little bit more aggressive than we'd prefer, because I hate the word aggressive because that sounds intense. It's nothing like any of your previous diets, but we tell people it's usually a little bit lower calorie than we'd prefer as coaches, because we're not spending 6 months at maintenance. But usually clients, once they go through that first reverse, that first cut, then they're like, cool, take me to maintenance. I'll stay there. I'll live there. I'll do what you say. And they trust the process and they understand it better at that point. But the only way that can happen is if we spend some time living at maintenance already.
The someday goal is that once you feel really good and comfortable in your own skin, you're spending most of your year maintaining and working on building muscle, period. So like that's where both of us live our lives now. I do not diet or track macros on the regular. If I did this like probably a year and a half ago now. I was going to a bachelorette party and I was like, ooh, all right, I'm going to be in a bikini. I had a kid a year and a half ago. I tracked macros for 2 months and I was able to get lean really stinking quick, because for the previous 2 years, I didn't diet at all, right? So I can drop down to 1,800 calories and see results like that. That's where we'd love you guys to get someday, where this is a tool that you're using max 3 to 4 months a year, not most of the year.
Yeah, 100%. One of the other common questions, and this one's kind of a loaded question, so it's going to be a couple of parts, but this is something that we get from, people, non-clients who message us, and also something that we work on pretty heavily with clients during their time in the program, is how to navigate social settings when you are actively tracking your macros, and then also how to navigate them when you're not. So we'll talk about tracking, kind of like the tools that we implement when it comes to tracking when you're navigating vacations or weddings or social events. I used to starve myself all day and think that I'll just save my calories, and then I would binge and act like an idiot all night. Don't do that. 0 out of 10. Don't recommend.
Don't do that.
Your current strategy, please stop it. I typically recommend that you front load your most important nutrients, or the ones that you're not typically going to be indulging in at night, meaning your protein and your fiber. So I tend to front load my day with lots of water, hydration, protein, fruits and veggies, just because usually if I'm going out with friends, we're probably having a nacho plate, right? As like an appetizer or something along those lines that's going to be a lot more carb and fat heavy specifically. Doesn't mean you can't consume protein or that you have to overindulge in your social setting. It's just kind of knowing what you're going into, and how to pre-track ahead of time. I mean, we typically encourage pre-tracking in any scenario anyway, just to make tracking and make your life easier, which is a whole nother conversation. But that's usually what I do when it comes to a social setting. If you are trying to track.
If you're tracking with a physique goal.
Yeah.
So I tend to ask my client first, hey, what's your plan for this? Do you want to track or do you not want to track for this special occasion? Whether it is one wedding or it is a vacation week. I want to find out, hey, where are you mentally with this? Because permission to not track if that doesn't feel best for you right now, right? And then we just realign our expectations to suit that. Then within that, I'm giving different suggestions, right? If they want to track, it's like, okay, do you just want to track proteins and fibers for the week? Maybe we only track proteins to make sure you're nailing that number. And then listen to your body when it comes to the other foods, right? We could do that. We could go all in, like Jill said, and kind of estimate to the best of our abilities. If not tracking, I tend to recommend the worth. Like I have these conversations with my clients where I say, like, I need you to identify what your worth its are. And every single person's worth its are going to be different. But I'll give an example for me. Like my husband used to be a lead brewer at a big brewery, and they had happy hours a couple times a week. Like, I don't even like beer, but I would find myself drinking at these events because it's a social thing and you get a free beer and like whatever. That's not worth it for me. I would much rather have nachos at brunch with my girlfriends on Saturday, or a date night with my husband out, or something like that. So for me, I eventually realized like this is no longer a special occasion. It's every couple weeks or every week. During those events, I would get a seltzer water with a splash of cranberry so people wouldn't nag me about not drinking because my worth it's are these other things. For somebody on vacation, maybe they're not a real big breakfast person. If they're not, I'll encourage, okay, why don't you start your day if there's a continental breakfast with eggs and fruit and some sausage? Not because waffles and pancakes are bad or off limits, but because you just told me you can't wait to have this seafood pasta at night, right? Like, so enjoy the thing that is the most worth it thing for you. Again, being mindful of building your plates around a protein and colorful food and drinking enough water because we don't want it to be an all or nothing thing where you are eating until you feel sick just because you're not tracking. That's not balance, right? So being mindful while still adding protein, adding fruits and veggies, adding water.
Yeah. It's funny. On my vacations, my worth it is breakfast. So I usually overindulge a little bit at breakfast. That will usually carry me through in terms of hunger. I'll have some form of like almost like just protein at lunch, and then dinner. I'm totally cool with like, steak and veggie and whatever, right? Like
you love a good steak. Yeah, I've been out with Jill guys and she'll order 2 whole steak dinners and eat them herself. And the waiters are it always catches the male waiters off guard. Yeah, they come over and they deliver her 2 plates and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she's like, "Yeah, they're both for me. I'm going to eat."
Is someone else coming? Do you want this one boxed up? No, I want them both on the plate and I want both plates in front of me at the same time.
2 full steaks with potatoes and a side of greens, and she will eat both whole plates. So anyway, and for me, I'm like, that doesn't do it for me for dinner. I'd rather indulge in my dinner and keep it leaner for breakfast. So just finding that balance for you is really good. And being really honest with yourself too. So like every day, every meal is not a special occasion, right? So if you are like, well, it was really worth it for me on Thursday for Thirsty Thursday out with your friends, and on Friday for trivia night, and for Sunday for brunch, and for Monday, then it's like, hey, just so you know, like let's zoom out. Let's look at the month. That's now become the majority or half of your month, right? So it's not my job to pick and choose your worth it's, but maybe you zoom out and look at the upcoming month ahead and decide like which 5 or 6 occasions are really things that are super, I just want to be in the moment and not think about food for. Cool. Let's prioritize them because every single moment can't be a special occasion and you still hit your health goals. It's just not practical.
Right. And if you're okay with progress being a little bit slower because you're overindulging more frequently than someone else, fine, that's cool as long as you have the right expectation.
I think that explains a lot about our results ourselves, because I think a lot of times people will see me out and I'm not a very social person. Like I'm kind of a hermit with my schedule and my people, my family, my parents. Like when I go out, I'm going to have whatever I want to eat and I'm going to enjoy every bite of it. And I think people right. And people see me eat or drink out and think like, oh my gosh, she has the great metabolism. She can have whatever she wants. Now, granted, yes, I've adapted my metabolism higher and higher because I lift weights a lot. But during my more normal, boring meals at home, I'm having eggs and potatoes and an avocado for breakfast. I'm having some sort of like, I don't know, tuna fish or sardines with crackers for a snack. Then for lunch, I'm having some sort of vegetable. So like I'm eating so nutrient dense at home that like, yes, I can afford to eat whatever I want when I go out because that's my choice.
Right. Yeah, 100%. We're the same way over here in that, like overindulging. Like I might have like a dinner out with my husband one night a week. However, typically when I'm doing that, I'm tracking and still being within reason. But like just that, if I like, it's very infrequent if we're just like going out and I'm going ham on like French toast or like ice cream or like a big thing and going out for drinks. That's like 3 times a year, maybe 4 at best. And even then I probably don't go over calorie wise. So yeah, I think that's important to understand. And then for vacation, we also, a lot of times with clients, we'll try to time it so that it aligns with like some type of diet break if we're in that place. Or a deload week, meaning you're taking a week off of lifts, which can be scary for some people. I just did this with a client recently. She's like, I'm feeling so stressed about my workouts. I feel like I have so many things to do. And I'm like, listen, you haven't missed a single freaking workout in 4 months since we started. Let's take this week off. And her next check-in, she was like, oh my God, that was life-changing. Thank you for like giving me permission to do that because I got all these like weird odds and end projects that I've been like lingering that I felt like I had so much time for. And I was like, had so much energy. And now I'm so excited to go back to my lifts. And I'm like, that's the purpose of it. So,
and usually when you go back to your lifts, you're actually stronger because your
Yes.
body used that week for actual recovery.
Yes.
So I think it surprises a lot of people. It actually will help. Like we will plan these weeks. It's not taking a week off or like, it's
You do
not
that whether there's
half-assing it.
vacation or not also was the
Yeah.
other part of that. But anything else with clients, if we are going into a vacation, I'm like, hey, just go in with the mindset of protein, steps, and water. Move your body, get some, don't be like a potato on vacation and overindulge and then be mad at yourself. Hydrate, still have protein at the front of your mind.
Go for long walks on the beach. Go for bikes with your bike rides or hikes with your family. Like find fun, active stuff to do instead of feeling like you have to waste your time in a hotel gym. Unless you're excited about trying new equipment in a hotel gym, then right on, right? But like we definitely don't
do like 1 to 2 lifts a week because I like to explore gyms and I like the thrill of like going to a new one and seeing what equipment they have. But like,
and I'm usually like on vacation, you will not find me working out. Okay. Like that is my deload. I will always be having fun and not thinking about workouts on vacation. And that's okay too.
No, I'm like, where are we hiking? Where are we going? What mountain can I climb? What's the coolest gym? But that's just me. Now, of course, it depends. If I'm in Mexico on an all-inclusive, you can find me on the beach in a chair for sure. But so you have to approach it in whatever way feels good for you. But yeah, do it. If you have a social event, is it like your sister's wedding? Like, don't track, be present, have fun. But if it's like your neighbors, like cousins, whatever's, graduation party, like, is that worth it to you to overindulge? Maybe. If it is, cool, and you make that decision. But it's what you do most of the time.
The next one is when clients or people just DMing us say, hey, tracking's just too tedious. I just can't do it. So we wanted to talk about, again, we don't think tracking is a forever thing. We see it as a tool to educate yourself on the food that you're consuming and also as a pretty reliable method to get from point A to point B physique wise. And then we like to help clients wean off of tracking so that they can maintain, which is how both of us maintain, not tracking most of our lives. We want to go over how to make tracking easier on yourself, because I think a lot of people make it way harder than it needs to be. So Jill, you want to take this one?
Yeah. So two of the first things that come straight to top of mind when I talk to people about this is one, tracking often feels tedious because you're still aiming for 1,200 calories or whatever restrictive number it is. Macros are going to feel so hard and so annoying if you're starting off doing it in this very low restrictive place because you don't have any wiggle room. The whole point is to utilize it and learn nutrition. And that can be really difficult straight off the bat in a low calorie deficit. The other thing is playing macro Tetris. Now, the first couple of weeks of macro tracking, I tell everyone it's like riding a bike. It's going to suck at first and you kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off. It's going to feel annoying. You're going to be like, I didn't know this was this many calories. I just had this conversation with a client. She was like, I tried to be mindful at work. I made the best choice. She said, I logged it later. And she was like, holy cow, I would have only eaten half of that sandwich. So I went over, but she now knows that, right? And she's starting to gain that awareness. And that's the point. So in regards to that also, just knowing there's going to be some fluctuation initially before you're able to dial it in. Pre-tracking is the other thing. If you are tracking macros and meeting a goal, just take 10 minutes the night before, 15 minutes if you're newer to it. Track everything before bed, meal prep according to that. And then I tell clients, I'm like, hey, if you eat the same general meals for a couple of days in a row, track one day, and then you only have to copy and paste. So you don't have to touch your phone again until Thursday or Friday, right? So when you look at it that way, you're like, oh, that's way easier. You don't have to play this macro Tetris, get to the end of the day with 2 protein and 60 fats, and you're like, what do I eat? Dramatic example, but you know what I mean. So those
something I have clients do a lot is pre-track proteins and fiber specifically. Like proteins are going to be the hardest one to hit. Most women and most people underconsume protein. So I have my clients track proteins in advance, and then it's like, okay, now here's your caloric goal. Enjoy food. Like you can fill in as long as you've had a couple fruits and veggies a day and hit your protein target, fill in the remaining calories with whatever combination of foods you enjoy, because carbs and fats are ample in our world right now. And it should be pretty easy to eat kind of whatever you want and fill in the remaining calories as long as you've had a few fruits and veggies and hit your protein target first. So kind of like pre-logging that just sets you up for success. Another thing is keeping meals basic. keeping cooking simple, or if you are a recipe follower, logging that recipe that you cook often so that you can just click it as a meal for future you. Like I make a butternut squash beef chili all the time. That's in there because then if I am choosing to track, it's like, okay, there's an easy one I can just click. Otherwise, I'm pairing together meals that are like, okay, I'm going to pick a protein. I'm going to pick a starchy carb. I'm going to pick something colorful and it's on my plate. And then I add whatever sauce I want to add. And there it is. I only have those 4 ingredients to log. It's a little bit easier. And again, if you guys see my plates, you see there's cilantro on top and jalapenos and like, I love flavor. I love a lot of ingredients, but again, like first of all, any vegetables or things like that are going to be negligible in calories. So let's just say veggies in itself are free for all as long as you're logging the oil or whatever you're adding to it cooking. But if you can keep it simple and say like steak and a baked potato, some Greek yogurt on top in lieu of sour cream and a side of green beans, like that's pretty easy to track.
Yep. Yeah. And you actually reminded me too with pre-tracking, the way that you said with like protein and fibers, sometimes clients will pre-track like, their big meals and leave 300 to 500 calories for snacks or whatever else it is. Right. So it's similar in getting your protein, the bulk of your protein and fiber. Something I personally used to do was we were like not great for a while about planning dinner. We like to just like go with whatever we wanted. I knew I needed probably around 500 to 600 calories for dinner. So I would track everything else in my day. I knew I had like a little small snack at night before bed after dinner. So I would track all my other meals and leave that window open. Now, if you find yourself doing that and going over every night, adjust or take a different approach. So there's definitely different ways to do that. But pre-logging and having some sort of plan and structure is so important to eliminate that frustration.
This kind of spins off of this topic a little bit, but based on what you just said, it also depends if you're in a deficit or a build phase. So if you are in a deficit, I would do the same thing when I used to track consistently. If I had a deficit, I would almost plan that I was going to undereat because it gave me extra wiggle room, right? In a reverse, you almost want to do the opposite because you don't want to have all these calories left over. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh no, now I need to stuff myself before bed. Like that's not healthy either. Yeah. So what we usually tell clients is regardless of your goal, whether you're building or cutting, hit or exceed your proteins always. Mm-hmm. Then if you are in a build phase, hit your calories or be within 100 over. If you're in a cutting phase or a deficit, hit your calories or be within 100 under. That will just keep it simple for you because if you're right on the line and you're like, I don't know, should I eat something else or not? It doesn't need to be that complicated. Hit or exceed your proteins and then be within 100 over or under, depending on which phase you're in.
I think that early on, I can very successfully now intuitively eat. Like I can almost to the gram wing it on my day and hit my nutrition goals very closely. So I kind of have 2 points to this. One is some type of planning or meal prep is going to be essential, especially in early stages. You have to have some sort of structure. One, so that you are being intentional about your food quality, right? And not just choosing convenience options all day. If you're eating fast food all day, every day and hitting your macros, that's cool. But like work on food.
You're not going to feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. So making sure that you're cooking meals at home is going to be important. If that's not an option, just being mindful of your selections and where you're getting food from. I don't remember my other point, so I don't know if you have
Well, you had talked about meal prepping. So I want to say like there's different ways of meal prepping. Like some people are very good at routine and they like having their Tupperwares of the same lunch and breakfast every single day and the same snack because it's easy for them to grab and go for work. I like to more so ingredient prep where it's like I will make 1 or 2 meats. Maybe I have shredded chicken in the crock pot and I have some steaks thawing in the fridge that I'm going to make extra. So I have leftover for lunch my next day. I make a couple, maybe I have potatoes and I have rice in my fridge ready to go so I can mix and match and grab as the week goes on. But in either case, whichever way you like to do it, you have those proteins and fibers and healthy foods readily available to just grab and go, so that you're not in the moment of being hungry and then just grabbing what's convenient. Oftentimes that'll make it way harder on yourself. We use the term macro Tetris. You don't want to play macro Tetris where you are logging as you go and then you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh shoot, I have 200 more grams of protein to like, I know that's ridiculous, but whatever the case may be, like I don't know. You don't want to get to the end of the day and feel like you have to make up for something or make up for it the next day. That's silly. We just will move on and start fresh the next day and pre-track your proteins to make your life easier.
I kind of forgot. This is like top of mind and I should have mentioned it in the beginning, but we talked about no matter when you're deciding like what direction to go with calories, maybe you're just looking to maintain right now. Cool. When you are, especially if you're new to tracking, you should always track for 2 to 3 weeks, just as you're normally eating to see what your habits are. And a lot of times people will sign up and say, well, the weekend's coming up. I'm like, good. I want to see that too. I like, if you're afraid that you overeat on the weekends, I need to see why your body is responding and why you're not getting the result that you want. Weekends are part of that and part of your life.
It doesn't just not exist because you didn't track it.
Right. So when you're going through that initial tracking period, the point of that is to find metabolically where you're adapted, but also it's to get in the groove of tracking your intake and monitoring things a little bit more closely and collecting that data and getting a better understanding of what these foods look like, right? Because we're not aiming for a specific target. So it's really great practice until we like hone in on a specific nutrition goal. And then you can track just protein and calories if you want. Jess talked about, depending on what phase you're in, like where your calorie goal should land. So you can track just protein and let carbs and fats land wherever they land, right? They're interchangeable as long as you're meeting your caloric goal. However, the caveat to that is we have a lot of women that are like former keto. So I always like to throw this in there. If you're still averaging 90 carbs a day, you need to get that up and not be too extreme in either direction with that. So I'll usually call clients and be like, hey, we're creeping up to like 90 grams of fat. We need to dial this back a little bit and make sure that we're getting carbs in too.
It should just be a good mixture of whole food, carbs, and fats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can try, you don't have to track all three macros. You can just track protein, calories, fiber if you want. And then if you are tracking all three macros, the other thing that people get frustrated with is feeling like they have to hit the goal perfectly. So just know there's a little bit of wiggle room there. If you're pre-tracking, you should be able to hit it easily, but we're not looking for clients to hit every macro on the gram. That would drive everybody bonkers. So again, we're typically looking for, are we hitting protein? Are we hitting calories? Are we hitting fiber? Are we not too extreme in either direction? Then we look at like food quality and all of those other components of it. But hopefully that helps with taking the pressure off too.
I just added another question that I get a lot that kind of spins off of this. So when Jill just said it's kind of a learning curve, it's like riding a bike. Like you're going to start tracking and then you're going to learn what foods you eat that have protein in them and what foods you eat that have fat in them. A lot of times people are like, well, can't you just tell me what to eat? Can't you just send me a meal plan? We will not do that ethically. And the reason being that part of our process is giving you suggestions based on your life and your tastes and how your family and culture is and like what kind of foods are already in your day. Then we can make specific adjustments and say, okay, cool. It seems like you love having Greek yogurt as a snack. That's high in protein. You're having a tough time hitting your calories. Let's switch to full fat instead of fat free. Boom. Okay, you and your family love eating this. Have you ever thought of adding blah, blah, blah to it to add some fiber? So we're making specific suggestions based on how somebody eats so that they can continue for the rest of their life. Like Jill knows this from coming from the bodybuilding space. Like anybody could write you a strict meal plan of chicken and brown rice and asparagus and broccoli for 30 days or even 6 months, and you're probably going to get ripped, but then you're going to get sick of those foods. What are you going to do when you have your parents over and they want to make an Italian spaghetti dinner? Like you're going to feel stuck in this little confined box of having to stick to your meal plan to see results. We want to teach you how to apply it to your life, which is why it is a pain in the ass at first. It might be frustrating for you as a client where we're like, no, I really want to see how you eat first, and then we're going to make tweaks. It is not going to be an instant overnight fix, but that's why we do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a client who asked for a meal plan. I was like, I'm never going to do this for you, I promise, but I'm happy to help you build one based on the foods that you enjoy. And she was frustrated at first, and then she felt like she had too much flexibility. I was like, well, you're giving yourself too much flexibility. The world is your oyster when it comes to macros, but you're not giving yourself any structure. Like we have to have some middle ground here. It can't be meal plan or free for all. We're not changing the behavior that's going to be sustainable in the long run. You're setting yourself up for failure. We have to make an adjustment here. And
there are tools that you can use. Like sometimes I'll say, okay, let's come up with some meals together. Here's a list of proteins. Here's a list of fats. Here's a list of carbs. Tell me which things off these lists you like, and we can talk about some meals to make with them. Or I have clients who are super busy and don't have time. So they order like Factor or pre-cooked meats at Aldi or whatever so that they can just microwave them. Like it doesn't have to be a perfectly curated meal that you're cooking from home, but it is going to be individual to what you do in your life. We're not just going to print you out a cookie cutter thing. It's just not sustainable.
Yep. So another couple of questions here. These are our last two questions. So what's the best protein powder? I don't know why everyone asks this question as if one is like completely superior over another. My answer is going to be whey protein if you can tolerate it. If you can't, don't do whey. And one that is from a reputable company where the quality of ingredients is good and that the amount of protein that's listed on there in one scoop is accurate. And then one that you like, but like your life shouldn't revolve around protein powder. We'll typically recommend get it from food and meat if you can. Protein powder is supplemental to your food. That doesn't mean, I have protein powder almost every day, not every day. But especially if I'm short or life is crazy and that's just, a convenience option, that's fine. I have favorite brands for sure, but my suggestion is a good quality, good brand whey protein if you can tolerate it. If not, there are also great vegan protein options too.
So when Jill says no, that it's coming from a reputable brand, basically you just want to look up, is it third-party tested? There's like different, like kind of like an accreditation type seal. Yeah, that'll tell you if it's third-party tested, just to say, okay, what we say is in here is actually what's in here. I usually tell clients, look for whatever has the highest grams in protein and the littlest grams in carbs and fats. That is not because we are anti-carbs and fats. That is because I like to eat my calories in food. So if I'm using it just as a supplement, I'm not trying to load up on a whole meal in one drink. Now, again, if somebody struggles with getting their calories in a day, maybe we go the opposite direction. But generally, that's what I suggest. And again, personally, I have a couple brands that I go to, but I am not pushing any particular brand. I tend to avoid the ones that are marketing themselves as meal replacements, because I think oftentimes I've seen that they're even low in protein. Like there's a couple brands out there. Yeah, there's a couple brands out there that women are drinking because they're like, oh, this is supposed to help me lose weight. And they're kind of low. And like I look for usually between 25 and 30 grams of protein a serving. And
usually like 0 to 5 of carbs and fats in that scenario.
Yeah. And again, if when Brett was like in college and he was like the skinny tall guy and he wanted to put on muscle, he's having a meal replacement type protein shake twice a day to try to get in an extra couple thousand calories, right? That's a different scenario for somebody who's really struggling.
Mind you, a meal replacement shake, a true one, is going to be like 500 plus calories. 150 to 250 calories is not a meal replacement for most people. It definitely can be if you structure your day that way, but
you're saying that because there's these companies that market that as a weight loss solution. Yeah. And then what ends up happening is when those women go back to adding a meal during that day, they haven't learned how to add a healthy meal that's protein rich. Really, they've lost the weight because they were in a caloric deficit. So yeah, high in protein, lower in carbs and fats. My go-to is whey. If not, some sort of like rice pea protein combination. And also, it's a supplement. It is still not our primary source of protein. I think that's important because when we sometimes set protein targets for women, they're like, okay, I'm going to buy all these protein bars and protein shakes. And it's like, whoa, let's eat a steak, or like let's get some protein in Whole Foods first and then use it at what it is as a supplement. If you're eating multiple bars and shakes a day, expect you will eventually probably have gut issues or build an aversion to a whey protein shake.
Mm-hmm. Last one is what supplements we take currently. I know we talked a lot about all these different protocols that we've done. So my current supplement regimen, trying to think, I take vitamin D/K, anywhere from 5 to 10,000 IUs a day. I take magnesium citrate twice a day. I take magnesium glycinate at night. I take a thyroid natural supplement once a day at night.
Specific to you and your thyroid. That is not something we're recommending for most people.
Correct. I take vitamin C, which is anybody can take. And then I take something called Mood Up from New Ethics. I texted Jess. I was like, I'm not telling anybody about this until I take this for like multiple weeks at a time. Again, don't go run and buy this. Talk to somebody first before you start this. But it is advertised as a hormone, I don't like the word regulating supplement. And it is great. I love it. And it does, I don't typically say, oh, I feel this specific difference from a supplement. And I really, really did with this one. It's a good quality. So if it ends up being the right supplement for you, I think it's a great addition. I feel like
you use that as a supplement, like in previous episodes, you've talked about being on Adderall for your ADD. Jill has come off of her ADD and has used that as like a help.
I can't remember anything, guys.
In that. Yeah, but it's pretty impressive that you've been off of that now for a few weeks and are still focusing and running a business like a boss. But I feel like that was right around the same time you started that Mood Up supplement.
Yeah. So it was good. And I think it was a good alternative. And I also was previously like on progesterone and it was too much of a dose. My cycle got wonky. It was something I'm playing with. I don't typically recommend hormone replacement therapy in outside of menopause unless it's a very specific scenario. So this was a good alternative, a lighter, gentler alternative to some regulation of those sex hormones as they fluctuate through my cycle without actually adding in the hormone itself. What about you?
Well, my supplements are pretty basic. Creatine monohydrate, 5 grams a day. Sometimes I will stop taking it for like 2 months at a time, but I'm on it most of the year.
Yeah.
Whey protein, or I'll do like the Only What You Need brand plant protein drinks every now and then, just as a convenience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that they have one that's like 32 grams of protein. I like the chocolate and vanilla ones. I take a multivitamin that has methylfolate, not folic acid. I take a fish oil pill. I take, I always pronounce this wrong because I get a tongue twister from it. Urolithin A, which is like,
I forgot it.
Cellular and mitochondrial health. Yep. I take mag glycinate 300 to 400 milligrams before bed, and it has helped me significantly with my sleep quality. And then if I start to feel like sniffles or like, okay, it's kind of sick season, I will up my dosage and I'll take extra vitamin C and vitamin D. That's it.
Yeah. I actually just posted on my story the other day too about magnesium spray. Now I'll tell you, when I bought this, I'm like, whatever, I don't believe in this. I am telling you that anytime I've used it, I've sprayed on my feet, let it dry for like 10 minutes and then I'm good. Anytime I have used it, I sleep so soundly. Don't ask me why I don't use it every night because I don't know. I think it's just laziness, but every single time I've used it, and I've used it on and off for months now. Great quality sleep. So I guess
what do you think about spraying it? I have one that is like magnesium with lavender. What about spraying it on your pillow or your sheets, or does it need to absorb in your feet first?
It's something about the bottom of your feet. I actually need to look this up. So like nobody quote me on this, but I think it's something about the skin on the bottom of your feet in terms of absorption. I think it was like the most effective.
I've heard that for like essential oil stuff and all that too. I was just curious. I actually have ever since you said that, like last week, I have one that I've had forever and I just have never really used it. And I sprayed it on my pillow the last couple of nights and I swear I had deep REM sleep with dreams that felt rested. But I was like, is this the placebo just from like the smell of the lavender? Because I literally just like sprayed it on my bed. I don't know if it actually works or not, but I slept good.
This one is actually advertised as like foot spray specifically. I'm sure you could put it somewhere else. It's not like it's going to be harmful, but I don't know. I just did what it said and it's working. So,
well, fun. Okay. So there we have a list of like 25 more questions. So we will definitely be doing another Ask Me Anything episode in the future, but hopefully this helps you guys out some with the stuff that we get common DMs on.
Yeah. So like I said, feel free to send us DMs if you have other questions that you want us to cover, because I feel like these are so fun for us and we can just do this style all day. So feel free to send us those, but that is all for this episode and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.